So I just had a look at the recent box office numbers, and up there are the Super Mario Bros. Movie, Evil Dead Rise, John Wick Chapter 4, and the Dungeons and Dragons movie. And it got me thinking, what do all these movies have in common? Well, they're either a sequel or based on some existing property. We go back a few weeks and we see Scream 6, a bloody sixth installment of a franchise, as if the Scream franchise is like Harry Potter or something. And then you've got Creed 3, which is the third film of a spin-off series based off a Rocky franchise that had 6 films in itself. And then you had Shazam 2, which is the cherry on top of the crumbling DCEU. And of course you had Ant-Man 3, which was like the millionth movie in the MCU at this point. And with all these films dominating at the box office, you just can't help but feel that Hollywood has given up on original movies and ideas. So I had a little dig at the historical box office data to see when this drop-off of original films happened. But it's not quite that simple. It is definitely true that Hollywood is definitely producing a lot more sequels, prequels, spin-offs, and remakes. And this trend can definitely give the impression that there are a lot fewer original films being made. And because of the size of the budgets and the marketing efforts put behind all these movies that are based on existing properties, this narrative that there's no more original content has just become the mainstream point of view. But when you look back and have a think about the history of cinema and the box office, you start to realize pretty quickly that the reliance on existing intellectual property has always existed. There are plenty of examples of non-original films being top performers at the box office all throughout history. You have classics like The Godfather, Jaws, The Exorcist, all based on novels. And then you had movies like The Sound of Music or Grease that were based on plays. And then you have all those Disney movies that were literally based on folklore and fairy tales like Aladdin, The Little Mermaid, and Pinocchio. So what actually has been driving the decisions to make these non-original films? From a business model perspective, it makes perfect sense. Audiences are more likely to reach into their pocket and actually pay money to go to the cinema, or nowadays to pay for a streaming service, if they're already aware of the intellectual property that the film or the series is based on.
Star Wars, cool.
That's because there's already been some legwork that's been done to build that connection with those characters and those stories and the audience. Studios capitalize on these IPs to create a sense of familiarity and to generate hype, making it easier to market and then sell tickets. Just look at successful franchises like Harry Potter, Transformers, The Hunger Games. Their successes can be attributed to existing fan bases and brand appeal, and this just reduces the studio's need or desire to take risks on original concepts. Let's look at the properties that the big players hold. Disney's sitting at the top with all the Marvel IP, they've got Star Wars, they've got Pixar. In a tier slightly below that is Warner Brothers with Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, the Lego films, and I guess the DC universe. And then Universal, they've got my personal favorite, the Fast series, and they've also got the Jurassic World series. And below them sit Sony and Paramount that really haven't got that big juicy property that is just printing money for them. That's not to say that, existing IPs never flop. I mean, Disney's definitely had its fair share of flops. The biggest ones being John Carter in 2012, which is based on a novel, and then also that movie in 2011, Mars Needs Mums, which is based on a children's book. But these seem to be the exception, not the rule. And more often than not, when Disney just sticks with the franchise formula, Disney pretty much can guarantee that people will pay up. And just having this guarantee, it's like having a safety net below them. Knowing that using existing IP will definitely bring at least a certain number of people in, the studios can feel comfortable investing and spending money on the production and distribution. Just think about it from the studio's perspective. If they have 2 options to go, one original concept, which they don't know how people are going to react, they don't know if people are going to like it, versus something that they know that people have seen before and they have enjoyed, and maybe they can put a little twist on it, make it a little bit different, at least people will recognize it. They're probably going to go with the tried and true option. And as much as people, including myself, can sit here and complain that,
they're not investing enough money in original films
and it's getting boring, everything is pretty much the same nowadays, people are still paying to watch these movies, and the bottom line is what's driving these decisions. So it's really clear that adaptations have always been a foundation and a staple of Hollywood. I mean, let's just look back in time. During the 1970s and the 80s, Hollywood often turned to literature and plays for inspiration. Many successful films were adaptations of books, such as The Godfather, like I said before, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, To Kill a Mockingbird, and then plays like A Streetcar Named Desire and Amadeus. They also made successful transitions to the big screen. And then in the 90s and the 2000s, when video games exploded, Hollywood recognized the potential of tapping into this world, and then films like The Super Mario Bros. In 1993 came out, Tomb Raider, and Resident Evil. Those were all the early attempts to bring video games to the big screen. And although they often struggled to capture the essence of the video game, that definitely has not deterred Hollywood from constantly trying to reach back and make video game adaptations. I mean, just look at the most recent Mario movie. And further down the line, when Hollywood wanted to look for familiar properties that people knew, now they're looking back and it wasn't just literature and plays, they had other movies that existed in the past. So they started to just look at Hollywood's past for inspiration. In the 2000s and 2010s, there was a surge in reboots and remakes of classic films being reimagined for modern audiences. Examples include Charlie and the Chocolate Factory in 2005, King Kong in 2005, and The Great Gatsby in 2013. These adaptations were literally just reaching back in time, finding a classic movie, and then just punching it up to modern audience expectations. And then more recently, there's been a growing trend in adaptations of older films. Instead of just completely remaking them, you sort of look at an older series or an older film and you sort of give it a bit of a spin and you take it somewhere else. And again, this is just Hollywood adapting from itself. You had Ocean's 8, a spin-off of the Ocean's 11 series. You had Blade Runner 2049, which was a sequel, I guess, of sorts to Blade Runner, but sort of just a movie that was set in the same universe with the same characters. And then you had Ghostbusters in 2016, which is also a spin-off of the original Ghostbusters series. And then you had Ghostbusters Afterlife in 2021, which I guess was set in the same universe as the Ghostbusters series and was trying to distance itself from the 2016 Ghostbusters. And now we're at a point today where the latest trend is to build a cinematic universe, or just to make an animated classic film into a live action film. After the immense success of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, everyone's been trying to make these cinematic universes. They've just evolved from the sequel model, which is just tell the story right after the story that was told previously. And now it's tell a story that's tangential in the same universe with some of the same touch points, but is not a direct following on from the previous story. That way, this tree just keeps growing. It's not just a straight line anymore. It's like a tree that branches out and then tries to reconnect. And because there's so many options, and because it has that inbuilt fan base and intrigue, that even though the story's not really aligned with another story in the same universe, but because maybe there's the same characters, they put these Easter eggs in it, people are intrigued and don't want to miss out on a piece of this universe. They still go and pay to go see those movies.
Ooh, you guys, I have FOMO!
And that's why all these universes started sprouting up. You had the failed DCEU, you had the failed Dark Universe, you have the Conjuring Universe. Even M. Night Shyamalan tried to create his own cinematic universe. And at this point in time, things are just getting so crazy. It's pretty much Hollywood just eating its own tail. And it's just not clear when it's gonna stop. Movie adaptations have just evolved over time. It's just broadened its horizons. From just being based on literature and plays, it's now broadened to the point where it's just adapting itself. And that sort of leads to these giant universes, these films with 10 sequels, and that can really make it feel like the originality is lost. But I definitely think it's wrong to say that. Streaming services have definitely emerged as a platform for original storytelling, and a lot of these streaming services are giving more creative freedoms to filmmakers. So while they might not get marketed or get the same recognition that they once did, great original films are still out there if you just look for them. Anyways, thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.